Now, let's imagine that this blog can have multiple contributors. If that's the case, we need to display their name somewhere in the header. Maybe like this. In PHP let's go to a single post view, and it could be something like by the author in the given category. And that would look something like this. And in fact, maybe even the author can be clicked. And if you do, that will show all blog posts written specifically by that user. Okay, if that's the case, we're not quite there yet. There should be a space here, but we could go ahead and wrap it within an anchor tag. And that'll give us something like this. Okay, let's make it work. Now you remember, out of the box in Laravel, you already get a users table migration. But at the moment, there is no connection between a post and a user. So that's our next step. Sounds like we need another foreign ID. So I'll copy that and we'll add user ID. And now let's refresh our database, migrate fresh. It'll drop all those tables and rebuild them. And now in Table Plus, in my post table, we do include a reference to the user. But now this is sort of annoying. When we're still building up our database structure, every time we refresh, we lose all of our example data, which means I'd have to rebuild the categories, rebuild the posts, we'll need to seed a user. And it can get annoying. I'll show you how to fix that. If we go back to PHP Storm, you'll see a database seeders directory. This is for seeding your database. And you'll see right now, they give you a basic idea for how to deal with this. Now you'll see this reference to a factory method, and we haven't gone over that yet. But you can kind of gather, well, we have a user and factory 10 times create. We're probably creating 10 users. How would we run this code? Well, let's have a look at PHP Artisan, and we're going to look for seed. All right, there's an option to make a seeder class, but that's not what we're doing here. DB seed, seed the database with records. Okay, let's give it a run. PHP Artisan DB seed. All right, so if I go back to Table Plus, we give it a refresh. Now we have 10 users in our database. But notice something. Every time I run it, it doesn't drop all of the records. So now we'll have 20. That's something to keep in mind. So what if we, and I'll delete these for now, what if we switch back and I will import this and let's just figure out what we need. Maybe we'll set up as part of our seeding a single user. I don't think we need more than one. We also need some categories, and I don't have a factory for categories yet. And in fact, we haven't even talked about what factories are. So we're going to hold off on that. But I could say category, and I'll import that, create one. And if you remember, all we need is a name and a slug. So maybe personal. And we'll do another one. So remember, this is for testing and local development only. In production, you wouldn't be constantly refreshing your database. So this is specifically for your local environment. Well, personal, family, and then I'll do one more for work. But now, if we try it, yes, it'll work. We have a new user and we have a set of categories. But yeah, again, if I run it, have a look at this. We're duplicating those categories. And that's because when we created the categories migration, we didn't specify that the name or the slug should be unique. We probably should. So let's come back to categories and we'll say the name is unique and so is the slug in this case. Okay, so have a look at this. Yes, I'm going to refresh my database. But if we once again view the help for it, you'll see there is an option to reseed the database after it's done, which means I could say PHP Artisan migrate fresh and then seed it as well. So notice it drops all the tables, it reruns them, and then it seeds my database, which means we should have an update here, but you still have your categories. So notice how this can save you a lot of time. A little work up front to declare your seeders will save you so much time in the future. But on that note, if I run dbseed again, let's see what happens. We get an error. And if you think about it, this is exactly what you'd expect. It's trying to add a duplicate entry into that categories table. So often what folks will do is within their database seeder, they will truncate these tables before rerunning them. We can do that right up here at the top. I could say 1 user, and then there's a method called truncate, and then the same thing for the category model. And that should clear those out. So now if we try to reseed again, we won't get any errors because before we run any of this code, we first truncate the tables, which is probably what you want. Okay, so now we've set up users, categories. Let's also set up some default posts. We'll do it right down here. Post, create, and I'll paste this in like so. But then we can't forget to associate the post with a category as well as a user. Now I'm going to show you lots of ways to deal with this using factories, but first, let's do it the manual way. Okay, so now we could create a post where the user ID is the user in question. The category ID, this one will be, what do we have here? Family. And that should do it. So maybe we'll seed our database with a total of 3 posts, or maybe 2. Here's one for work. And then, of course, at the very beginning, we'll truncate the post table. All right, let's run our seeder. And if I switch back to Table Plus, there we go. We have a couple posts, we have a user, we have some categories. And now the next time we have to change up our database, you can run migrate, fresh, seed, and you're back up and running. You instantly have your records again. And if I go to Firefox and we go to the main page, yeah, we're good to go here. So anyways, I will teach you a little more about database factories in the next episode, but for now, let's get back on track. You'll notice that we now have in our post table a connection to a user. So this post was written by the user with an ID of 1. Okay, the only remaining step is to set up that Eloquent relationship. If a post belongs to a user or is written by a user, well, then our relationship is user and return belongs to. And what about the inverse? A user can write many posts, right? So let's scroll down here at the bottom and set up the inverse relationship. If you have an existing user and you want to grab their posts, then you need a method called posts, and that will be a has many relationship. A user has many posts. Okay, let's play around and tinker, and then we'll view it in the browser. So if I find a user, there we go. Let's find her posts. There you go. She's written, in this case, 2 posts. That version works. What about if you have a post and you want to find the user who wrote it? Well, post, first, user. Or don't forget what you learned about in the last episode, I believe, on eager loading. You could say, well, this version just gives you the post. But if we do it again and we say, but also eager load or include the user along with the query, now Eloquent and Laravel will execute 2 queries. We have the full post along with the user who wrote it. So the only remaining step is to visit our post view and make this dynamic. Written by the posts, and we called it user, and then we'll grab their name, which should be Miss Lenora Lubowitz. All right, come back to Firefox, go to this one, and I forgot my paragraph tags. But the important thing is I do see the person who wrote the post. And in this case, she wrote both. Kind of cool. So real quick, let's go back to our database seeder. And right down here, we could, at the very least, wrap these in paragraph tags. And then duplicate it. Okay, let's seed our database again. db seed, it'll truncate those tables and repopulate them. So now if I come back and refresh, that's been fixed. And now we have a generic user named Dario. So that brings us to the next lesson. If you're wondering where Dario Ringer comes from, well, notice in this case we are hard coding the data. But in the case of user, again, it's delegating to this factory method where it references what is literally fake data. So let's talk about that a bit more in the next episode.